His name is Bob, and this is his best friend, Chuck. They are both 17. Chuck was behind the wheel and traveling fast, perhaps too fast. He screamed, clawed at his eyes, and rammed head-on into an oncoming car. Chuck's girlfriend is badly injured. The other driver is dead. And so is Chuck. Why this? What happened? It was only a few short weeks ago, really. Bob and Chuck were friends, good friends. They enjoyed a lot of good times together. Nothing really unusual about Bob and Chuck, just a couple of guys in the midst of the normal process of becoming adults. Certainly nothing to foreshadow the tragic events in which they were to find themselves, unless it was another group of young people from school. Frank and his group. They too had an interest. Lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD, acid, 25. Take your pick. It's equally dangerous under any name. Like most acid heads, Frank had a compulsion to turn others on. Maybe unconsciously he felt less guilty about his weakness if he could get others to do as he did. There's a much better way to fly than with toy planes. He tried to be persuasive, but there was something weird about the way he acted. It was an old approach: taunts, dares, ridicule. If you don't turn on, you don't belong. You gotta turn on, tune in, and drop out. Experience the mind-expanding powers of acid. It's psychedelic, baby. That's what it's all about. Bob was not impressed. He didn't know much about LSD, but what he had heard he didn't like. Acid seemed like a whole lot more trouble than it was worth. Sure, taunted Frank. Exactly what the establishment wants you to believe, and you just eat it up. Bob wasn't convinced, but Chuck was not quite so unaffected. Although he tried to appear nonchalant, the adventure in it appealed to him. What if it really does give you a greater insight to yourself? At least we can try the stuff, Chuck argued. What harm can that do? Bob was adamant. It would just be a stupid thing to do. And for the first time, the boys had a real disagreement and went their separate ways. Bob was surprised. He tried to talk with his friend. But Chuck, perhaps to hide his embarrassment, was aggressively defensive. In fact, just to prove to Bob that he's his own master, he informed him defiantly that he'd be taking his first acid trip that very day. Bob was disturbed. What was happening to Chuck and the others? Simple. Acid. LSD. What is the truth about it? The real truth? Maybe it isn't so bad. Bob decided to find out, not from being told by anyone else, pro or con. He'd make his own inquiries. The library provided ample scientific information about the drug itself. Lysergic acid diethylamide, 25, was first synthesized in Switzerland in 1938 by a biochemist, Dr. Albert Hoffman, while studying a parasitic fungus that attacked European rye fields. In its pure form, LSD is colorless, with no taste or odor, and when distributed to the users, it is mixed with other ingredients to get bulk. The drug is usually found in capsule or tablet form, in liquid vials, or in the now outdated sugar cube. A single ounce would provide an average dose for 300,000 people. The observable effects on the body from taking LSD are only slight, the most notable being a dilation of the pupil, making the eyes supersensitive to light. But while the physiological effects are quite unspectacular, the effects on the mind are explosively disruptive. Reaction to the drug is completely unpredictable. It can be the hoped-for heaven or a hell full of horror, and there are all too many cases of young people who have become permanently deranged through a single terrifying acid trip, while many others have cruelly injured or mutilated themselves in their deluded state of mind. There is no sure antidote for a bad trip. Although tranquilizers and barbiturates are used, they are not always effective. No deaths have yet been reported for an overdose of the drug, so the lethal dose is unknown. In some cases, damage may be inflicted on the user's chromosomes, which influence heredity. The younger the person, the greater the damage. Although the indiscriminate use of LSD is too new for any experimental certainties, there have been births of deformed babies where the drug is the strongly suspected cause. And it is a fact that animal embryos have been horribly deformed by mothers who had been given average doses of LSD. The effects of the drug usually end in 6 to 10 hours, but the risk of an unsuspected mental time bomb remaining is always there. Unexpected recurrence of all the effects in their original intensity has been reported as long as a year after the last trip. One of the claims made for LSD is that it frees the mind for creative thinking and work, yet only the opposite has been proven. It is only in the subject's own deranged mind that his abilities are expanded, a cruel self-delusion. Actually, his creativity is so distorted, no relationship to reality is possible. So, while there are bona fide medical uses and benefits to be derived from the drug, the LSD image made popular by certain advocates is based on myth, while the inherent dangers are based on facts. From a legal standpoint, most offenses involving LSD are classified as felonies. Even the possession of a small amount is a misdemeanor. The drug is considered so dangerous that all legitimate manufacturers have ceased production, and LSD is only legally available for research purposes. Therefore, to provide the acid head with his instant escape, the drug is being produced by underground amateur chemists in clandestine, often unsanitary laboratories, where control over quality is a joke, adding yet another danger to an already dangerous drug. And there is also ample evidence that organized crime is enjoying a good piece of the action. Who then could use such a harmful drug? Unfortunately, the ones most likely to become involved are the high-risk elements, the immature, the unstable, those who will risk everything without a thought to the future. One arrest, and never again will he be able to say no to the question, "Have you ever been arrested?" A fact that will have to be lived with for a long time. LSD is not habit-forming the way some other drugs are. It is worse. The user becomes psychologically hooked. That is one reason why national medical societies have called acid the most dangerous of all illegal drugs and narcotics. The latest findings after prolonged and exhaustive studies report strong indications of premature aging, increased susceptibility to cancer, especially fatal leukemia, and possible harm to children and even grandchildren through the use of LSD. How dangerous? How serious the permanent damage done? No one knows as yet. The answers will come from those young people who today are willing to use themselves unthinkingly as human guinea pigs. As one scientist put it, someday their affected brains may end up in laboratories and provide the answers. And while Bob was forming his opinions about LSD with facts, Chuck was getting his education firsthand. With an average dose of acid, the first symptoms may come in 15 minutes, but the usual reaction time is about 3/4 of an hour. So, the brave ones wait for an unknown reaction of the mind-distorting drug. Bob dug deeper. He talked with various kids at school whom he knew were or had been on LSD. He was concerned and puzzled by what he found. A definite shift of values was evident in the acid heads, a subtle but unmistakable change in attitude. They displayed a listless indifference instead of their former awareness, morbid introspection in place of productive activity, a disturbing, decaying, wasting away. The more Bob uncovered, the more he saw for himself the hardships and grief suffered by the parents and homes of misguided young people who are too weak to face reality and try to find a quick escape in a world of illusion. Unfortunately, these dreamy, psychedelic trips are very often one way. As the days went by, Bob grew increasingly concerned. He was learning the actual facts about LSD and the serious effects and consequences of taking it under non-medical, unsupervised conditions. It was a clear picture to which innumerable magazine and newspaper articles gave witness. Frightening accounts of self-inflicted injuries, mental breakdowns, violence, suicide, even murder. Chuck was also learning new things. Quick, easy ways to pay for his quick, easy pleasures. And he'd finally persuaded his girlfriend, Susan, to go on a beautiful trip with him, to merge their inner beings in a world of wonder and delight, to gain new mind-expanded insight to themselves and each other. Bob was determined to talk to Chuck and set out to find him. For Chuck, the acid trip was now a familiar route, so he decided to sit this one out to watch over Susan. But Susan was not quite turning on as he had planned. Chuck was alarmed. He hadn't bargained for a freak-out. Susan's car was downstairs, and he decided to take her home. Since it seemed impossible for Bob to get to and talk with his friend, he decided to write a letter. Without sounding stupid, Bob tried to put his honest feelings in the letter. He used the only tools he had left to influence his friend: reason and logic. Chuck didn't like it, but it was probably just a harmless little bonus from his last trip.
Those are the facts about LSD, Chuck. Honest. There is just no future in being an acid head. You and I have been friends for a long time, and I don't want to try to tell you how to live your life. But like it or not, we are adults now, and we have the power to make decisions that will affect our entire lives. Before you know it, you will be seriously considering marriage. How do you think Susan would feel about the prospect of having deformed children? As for myself, I have just started to live, and I don't want to look back in a few years and have to say, was I ever a stupid kid? Maybe the world is all fouled up, but we sure don't have to do our bit to make it worse.